The air on this rock didn't just smell bad, it tasted like a chemical spill in a crematorium. A heavy, stagnant soup of ionized ozone, scorched polymers, and the distinct, copper-heavy stench of open-air slaughter. Sergeant Jaxen Thorne moved through the haze with the twitchy, rhythmic caution of a man who'd spent too many deployments watching his friends get turned into vapor. The battlefield was a mess of high-tech debris and meat. Human and Xyl'thari sprawled together in a final, ugly embrace, their differences irrelevant now that they were both cooling into the sand. Beneath his combat boots, the silica had been fused into jagged, glass shards by plasma fire, crunching with a brittle sound that grated against his nerves like a serrated blade. "Fubar," he muttered, the word dry and dead in the back of his throat. He glanced at the HUD overlay on his retina. His rifle's power cell was bleeding out at 43%. A guttering candle in a hurricane. His squad's biotags had winked out one by one during the meat grinder retreat, leaving him as the last ghost in the machine. Now, he was just a lone contact moving through rust-colored dunes, guided by a nav system that was glitching like a cheap neurosim and a stubborn, lizard-brain instinct that refused to accept the inevitable. A sound cut through the white noise of the wind, a low, wet groan that didn't belong to the machines. Thorne pivoted, the rifle stock welded to his shoulder, tracking the source with practiced lethality. Behind the mangled skeleton of a hover tank, he found the source. He approached with the slow, deliberate footsteps of someone who knew exactly how many ways a dying enemy could still kill you. What he saw made his tactical subroutine stall. It was a Xyl'thari female, her pale green skin looking sickly and translucent under the harsh, alien sun. Her combat skin, a high-end weave of midnight black fibers, was shredded, weeping dark fluid. But the real horror was the structural damage. Her legs had been erased below the knees. Cauterized stumps, the work of a tactical plasma mine. It was a clean, brutal amputation that left her grounded in the grit, her potential for violence stripped away with her mobility. "Geez," Thorne exhaled. Her hair was a matted nest of silver-white filth, but her face still held a sharp, dangerous symmetry even through the haze of shock. Her eyes snapped open, Arctic ice irises that looked like they belonged in a predatory drone. She saw the human silhouette and lunged for a sidearm that was probably a kilometer back in the dust, the effort twisting her features into a mask of pure, unadulterated agony. "Don't bother," Thorne said, his voice flat, professional. He lowered the rifle muzzle but kept the safety off. "I'm not looking to add to the body count." She spat a string of sibilants that his translator flagged as a high-tier dialect, before settling on a series of standard profanities that would have made a deckhand blush. Thorne felt a grim twitch of amusement. "You've got a lot of fight left for someone missing their lower half. Finish it or frag off, monkey," she rasped, the standard coming out with a jagged, clicking edge. "I don't need a lecture on mortality from a biological dead end." Thorne watched her for a long, quiet minute. Every line of his training told him to put a round in her brain or keep walking. The Xyl'thari weren't just the enemy, they were a biological upgrade that viewed humanity as a failed prototype. But he was tired of the protocols, tired of the blood, and tired of leaving people behind. He wanted to do something that wasn't on the mission briefing. "What's your tag?" he asked. She stared at him as if he'd just started speaking in tongues. "What?" "Your name." "I'm Jaxen Thorne. If I'm going to burn my med supplies on an enemy combatant, I'd like to know who I'm keeping on the payroll." "You're a glitch," she said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous hum. "I am Vaelin'thra Kray, Obsidian Fang shard. My people have already scrubbed my data. I'm a casualty. Move on." Thorne dropped his pack, the metal-on-metal clang echoing in the silence. He started pulling out trauma foam and neurostaplers. "Good thing I never learned how to read a casualty report." "The blood loss has clearly fried your circuitry," Vaelin'thra remarked, though she didn't resist as he began the messy work of stabilizing her. "Why play the martyr for a species that wants you extinct?" "Maybe I'm just curious," he grunted, his fingers slick with her blood as he worked. "And maybe I'm sick of this war being a zero-sum game. One less corpse isn't going to break the economy." As he stapled her flesh back into some semblance of order, Thorne felt a cold shiver of intuition. He was crossing a line that didn't just separate two armies, but two versions of the future. Through a dusk that looked like an oil slick, Jaxen carried her. He felt the hum of his suit's servos, a mechanical vibration that resonated through his bones as he hauled her weight. Vaelin'thra had finally clocked out, her nervous system shutting down under the heavy load of the nanites he'd pushed into her system. "Stay with me," he muttered. His sensors pinged a structure, a pre-war research block half buried in the shifting rust. It was a concrete tomb, a relic of some corporate science project that had gone south years ago. He kicked his way through a rusted pressure door and laid her down on a floor that smelled like ancient dust and forgotten budgets. The lights flickered to life, a low-power emergency amber that made the shadows dance. He set up a perimeter, dropped some thermal blankets, and waited. When she finally groaned and opened those ice-blue eyes, he was ready. "Where?" she asked, her voice a dry rasp that sounded like sandpaper on steel. "Old research block," Thorne said, checking his rifle's charge. "Safer than the open dunes." She looked up at him, her gaze a sharp, piercing probe. "I told you to leave me. And I told you I don't follow stupid orders." He handed her a nutrient pack. "Choke this down. Your metabolism needs the fuel." She took it, her movements fluid despite the trauma. "You're an anomaly, Thorne. A human who thinks he's a hero. That's a dangerous delusion. It's not about being a hero. It's about being effective." She looked at the stumps of her legs, her face going cold. "I am ineffective. A warrior with no base of fire." "Don't get dramatic," Thorne said. "I can hook you up. This place is a goldmine for old cybertech. We get the right interface, you'll be faster than you ever were." "My people, we don't believe in dirtying the genome with hardware," she said, though the conviction in her voice was wavering. "Purity is our mandate." "Purity is a luxury for people who aren't bleeding out in a basement," Thorne retorted. "Hardware is just a tool. You want to walk, or you want to sit here and be pure?" Vaelin'thra watched him, her eyes tracking the scars on his arms. "You're a hard man, Jaxen Thorne. There's a lot of iron in your soul. Comes with the job. Now, how about we stop talking and start mending? Our file said humans were just sentient meat," she said softly. "But you've got a core of something else. Something compelling. Don't get sentimental on me." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "I'm not being sentimental. I'm being observational. Our intel also mentioned that human males of your phenotype are surprisingly aesthetic. Rugged, like a well-built assault chassis." Thorne felt a heat in his face that had nothing to do with the heaters. "Is that right?" "Very," she purred, her eyes traveling over him with a predatory hunger. "You're a fine specimen of a dying breed. You face death without blinking, but a compliment makes you twitchy," she laughed, a sound that was both musical and dangerous. "Fascinating." The floor suddenly buckled. A seismic rumble, deep, tectonic, and angry, shook the station. "Artillery?" she asked, her hand instantly reaching for a weapon. "Geological," Thorne said, grabbing his gear. "This whole plate is unstable. We need to move deeper." He scooped her up, and this time, she didn't just tolerate it, she leaned into him. Her arms wrapped around his neck, her touch a cold, electric shock through his combat suit. "My savior," she whispered, her breath hitting the sensitive skin of his neck. "Save it for later," he growled, heading into the dark heart of the ruins. The ceiling came down in a thunderous roar. Thorne threw himself over her, his suit's shields flaring into a blinding white as they took the hit. Then, there was only silence and the smell of pulverized stone. They were trapped in a pocket of air no bigger than a coffin. "Great," Thorne coughed. "I always wanted to die in a hole." Vaelin'thra was pressed against him, her lithe body a constant, distracting pressure. "There are worse ways to go," she murmured, her voice a low vibration in his chest. "Being trapped with a sturdy human warrior has its perks." Thorne felt his pulse spiking. The proximity was lethal. "Focus, Vaelin'thra. We're losing air." "My people believe in seizing the moment," she countered, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "If this is the end, I want to feel the fire before the frost." She kissed him then, a collision of teeth and hunger that tasted like adrenaline and desperation. It was a raw, biological imperative that bypassed all the politics and all the war. The air, Thorne choked out, pulling back for a second. 2 hours, maximum. We have to find the maintenance shaft. Then find it, she said, her eyes burning. Because I have no intention of letting this be the only time I taste you. They found the shaft. It was a tight, claustrophobic crawl, Thorne hauling her on his back through the darkness. The friction of her body against his was a constant, driving motivation. They emerged into a pristine medical suite, a high-end cybernetics lab that looked like it had been waiting for them. Jackpot, Thorne said, stripping off his helmet. Vaelin'thra looked at the interface units. You're going to do it? The neural stitch. I'm a 3rd Marines medic, he said. We don't do half measures. But the bond, it goes both ways. You'll feel everything I feel. Every urge. Every dirty thought. Good, she whispered. I've always preferred the truth to the propaganda. The hours that followed were a blur of surgical lasers and neural feedback. As the black chrome prosthetics integrated with her spine, the bridge between their minds snapped into place. It was an explosion of sensory data. He felt her hunger, her fierce pride, and her burgeoning, undeniable need for him. God, he breathed. I can see myself through your eyes. And I can feel the weight of your love, she replied, her voice thick with emotion. What happened next was an inevitable fusion of biology and hardware. A celebration of life in the middle of a graveyard. Hours later, as they lay together, Vaelin'thra touched her stomach. The link, it did something. A biological resonance. I can feel a new signature. A bridge between us. Thorne went still. A kid. A legacy, she corrected. Proof that the war is a lie. The peace conference at Station Aurora was a joke. A room full of suits and uniforms arguing over territory while they ignored the reality of the bodies they'd left behind. When Jaxen and Vaelin'thra walked in, her on her black light cybernetics, glowing with pregnancy, the room went dead silent. This is the future, Thorne announced, his voice carrying the weight of a man who'd seen the bottom of the world and come back. Deal with it. The labor started in the middle of a ceasefire debate. It was a frantic, beautiful chaos of human and Xyl'thari tech working in tandem. Their daughter was born, a hybrid of pale green skin and human grit. The eternal nexus, the High Matriarch whispered, seeing the mark on the baby's shoulder. No, Thorne said, looking at his daughter. Just hope. 5 years later. New Aurora was a sprawl of glass and steel. Thorne watched from the balcony as hope ran through the streets, a perfect blend of 2 worlds. Vaelin'thra stepped out behind him, her cybernetic grace as lethal as it was beautiful. Still brooding, Commander? Just thinking about how close we came to missing all this. She pulled him into a kiss that still tasted like that first night in the ruins. We didn't miss it. We took it. Hope's laughter echoed from below. They were the architects of a new world, built on the ruins of the old one, founded on a choice made in the red dust. Worth it? She asked. Every second, he replied, pulling her close as the suns of a new era rose over the horizon.